In the summer of 1973, before horror franchises became billion-dollar machines, Tobe Hooper and a scrappy crew headed into the brutal Texas heat to film what would become one of the most notorious horror movies ever made, with no budget, no air conditioning, and no clue how miserable it was going to get. We're diving into 20 terrifying facts about the chaotic, disgusting, and unforgettable making of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Oh, and stick around for number 1, because let's just say, this wasn't acting. This was survival. Number 20.
I created Leatherface.
Leatherface was inspired by a real doctor who made a skin mask. Everyone assumes Leatherface was ripped straight from the Ed Gein handbook, that infamous guy who treated human skin like a home decor project. But the real inspiration came from someone much closer to Tobe Hooper. And honestly, it's even creepier. Hooper once shared that a doctor he knew casually told him about something he did back in med school. During a cadaver dissection, this guy decided it would be hilarious to skin a cadaver and turn that into a Halloween mask. Yep, not a costume shop mask, an actual human skin mask. That stuck with Hooper. So much so that Leatherface's iconic look, the stitched-up horror show of faces, wasn't just an homage to Ed Gein. It was directly inspired by Hooper's very real, very creepy friend. So yes, while Ed Gein left his fingerprints on the concept, it was Hooper's doctor buddy who handed him the real nightmare fuel. Number 19. Gunnar Hansen's moves and screeches were inspired by pigs and real mental patients. If you thought Leatherface's weird animalistic squeals and twitchy movements were just random creepy choices, nope. Gunnar Hansen, the actor inside that flesh mask, actually went to study how to act that unhinged. When Hooper told Hansen he wanted Leatherface to sound like a pig squealing in terror, Hansen took it literally. He didn't just guess how a pig might squeal. He drove out to a friend's farm and spent time with actual pigs. He observed exactly how pigs squeal, the pitch, the panic, and the unpredictability. That's why Leatherface's screams sound so disturbingly authentic. But Hansen didn't stop there. To bring Leatherface's creepy movements to life, he visited an Austin mental hospital and studied patients, their body language, how they shuffled, and how they twitched, channeling this into that performance. No dialogue, no expressive face, just unsettling body language that screamed, "This guy is not okay." That's why Leatherface was something stranger and scarier than most horror characters. Hansen made sure of it. Number 18. It's not a true story, no matter what the poster said. That iconic title card promising an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths, total fiction. So was the tagline. What happened is true. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. But if you were traumatized into thinking it was, congrats, you fell for one of the best marketing scams in horror history. Director Tobe Hooper and co-writer Kim Henkel cooked up the Texas Chainsaw Massacre using inspiration from real-life ghoul Ed Gein, who did dabble in home decor made from human remains. But Leatherface, the cannibal family, the bone-filled farmhouse of doom, pure fiction. Still, thanks to clever promos, drive-in buzz, and the general public's lack of Google in 1974, people bought the lie. Some still do. Gunnar Hansen, Leatherface himself, once said fans would swear up and down they knew the real Leatherface. You didn't. Nobody did. And frankly, that's for the best. So next time someone tells you it's a true story, feel free to reply, only if your dentist moonlights as a chainsaw-wielding maniac.
Case closed.
Number 17. The Christmas shopping crowd that sparked a chainsaw. Before Leatherface was chasing teens through a meat hook nightmare, Tobe Hooper was stuck in a department store trying not to lose his mind. Stuck in a sea of elbows and screaming children during a 1972 Christmas shopping rush. Hooper found himself zoning out near a display of power tools. And in that moment of stress-induced clarity, while staring at the chainsaws, he thought, I could get through this crowd real quick with one of those. And Didnt horror history was born. Now, instead of committing an actual crime, he channeled that frustration into a script. In 30 minutes, he sketched out a slasher fairy tale complete with cannibals, a deranged family, and a girl who just couldn't catch a break. He later said it felt like the zeitgeist just blew through him, probably because mall stress is universally soul-crushing. So yeah, one of horror's greatest cult films didn't start with a seance or serial killer obsession. It started with Hooper trying not to go full homicide during a holiday sale. Number 16. The movie was shot in just 16 days. Let's just be clear. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was shot in 16 days. 16. And somehow, in just over 2 weeks, this scrappy indie crew managed to crank out one of the most influential horror films of all time, with zero studio backing and a budget that wouldn't buy you a used Honda today. Director Tobe Hooper ran the set like a fever dream marathon. Long days, minimal breaks, and the kind of heat that makes people hallucinate. And it's maybe because of this that Tobe Hooper and his ragtag crew crammed in enough screaming, sweating, and psychological torment to traumatize audiences for 5 decades. The schedule was so tight, actors barely had time to sleep, much less question the script. And with stunts, makeup, and literal chainsaws on deck, safety wasn't exactly priority number 1. But here's the twist. The rush actually worked. That chaotic energy is in the film. It feels real because everyone was genuinely exhausted, miserable, and slightly unhinged. Number 15. The shoot was an absolute hellscape. If hell had a film set, it would look a lot like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre shoot in 1973. It was over 100 degrees in the Texas sun. The house had no AC. The cast wore one outfit for the entire film. And since there wasn't money for duplicates, they couldn't wash anything, ever. By week 2, that costume smelled like a war crime. There was one bathroom for 35 people. The props, real bones, real rotting meat. The dinner scene? People literally vomited between takes and sprinted to the windows just to breathe air that wasn't soaked in sweat and grease. Director Tobe Hooper later called it an interesting summer. That's one way to describe watching your cast spiral into madness while a man in a skin mask waves a live chainsaw around. So yeah, the terror you see on screen, it wasn't all acting. Sometimes the horror was very real. Number 14. Hooper actually wanted a PG rating. You know what Tobe Hooper really wanted out of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? A PG rating. Yes, PG, as in parental guidance, for the film where a woman gets chased through the woods by a man wearing someone else's face. Hooper genuinely thought that if he kept the blood off screen and toned down the gore, the MPAA would be like, sure, bring the kids. And technically, he followed the rules. Most of the violence in Chainsaw is implied, not shown. Hooper claimed the film only had about 2 ounces of blood total. But what he didn't account for was tone. And Chainsaw is intense, gritty, dirty, the kind of movie that makes you want to shower afterwards. So the ratings board took one look, broke out the R stamp, and slammed it on like a warning label. Still, you've got to admire the optimism. Hooper thought he was making a grimy fairy tale. The MPAA thought he was making pure nightmare fuel. Number 13. The legendary dinner scene. Took 27 straight hours. You know that dinner scene? The one where Sally's tied to a chair, surrounded by a family of human taxidermy enthusiasts, while Grandpa tries and fails to hit her with a hammer? Yeah? That scene took 27 hours to shoot. One single scene. It all came down to Grandpa. Actor John Dugan had to endure a brutal 10-hour prosthetic makeup session to look like a corpse in suspenders. After that, he told Hooper, "I'm only doing this once." So the crew locked in, sweat dripping, meat rotting, lights blasting like a tanning bed from hell, and just didn't stop. The result was a claustrophobic, nauseating fever dream of a sequence that feels like it goes on forever, and kind of did. Actors were throwing up between takes. Gunnar Hansen later admitted that he was actually hallucinating. It's not just one of horror's most iconic scenes. It's also one of its most cursed. And yet somehow no one walked off set. Probably because there wasn't a working door left. Number 12. Leatherface wore 3 different masks, all for mood. You'd think one human skin mask would be enough for a horror icon, right? Nope. Leatherface came with options. 3 masks to be exact, each tailored to a specific vibe. First, there's the classic killing mask, the stitched-up nightmare fuel he wears while chasing victims around with a chainsaw. Then there's the grandma mask, which he wears while prepping dinner like a psychotic version of Julia Child. And finally, there's the pretty lady mask, complete with makeup, reserved for sitting at the dinner table with his family and pretending to be civilized. Tobe Hooper explained it like this: Leatherface doesn't have a real identity. His personality changes depending on which face he's wearing. It's unsettling, but kind of brilliant. So yeah, Leatherface wasn't just terrifying. He was expressive. He had looks, mood swings, and an entire deranged wardrobe. Number 11. Marilyn Burns was genuinely injured during the finger scene. You know that scene where Grandpa sucks blood from Sally's finger at the dinner table? Yeah, that wasn't special effects. That was real blood from actress Marilyn Burns. Here's what happened. They were shooting that scene after almost 20 hours straight. Everyone was exhausted, sweating, and losing their minds. The effect was supposed to be simple. Use a dulled knife, pump some fake blood through a hidden tube, and call it a day. But the prop kept failing. Over and over and over. Finally, Gunnar Hansen, aka Leatherface, got fed up. Without telling anyone, he ripped the tape off the blade and actually cut her finger. For real. They were all so miserable. He just wanted the scene done. That scene hits differently when you know it came with a side of genuine pain. Real blood, real sweat, and zero budget. That was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, filmmaking at its best. Number 10. It was a massive box office hit. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre may have looked like it was filmed with lunch money and a borrowed set, because honestly, it kinda was. But it went on to make $12 million in its first year from a budget of just under $90,000. Think about it. This scrappy, sweat-drenched indie project with no stars, no studio backing, and one unwashed costume outperformed most polished studio films at the time. It became the drive-in sensation, spreading by word of mouth and terrified gasps from theater exits. Even with a mob skimming money off the top, the film crushed it at the box office. It eventually grossed over $30 million worldwide, making it one of the most profitable horror films ever made. Number 9. The cast didn't get paid. No, really. You'd think starring in one of the most profitable horror films of all time would come with a decent paycheck, but nope. The Texas Chainsaw cast walked away with basically nothing. Most of them agreed to take shares in the production company, Vortex, since there wasn't enough money for proper salaries. The plot twist? Vortex only owned half the movie, so their profit participation was already sliced in two before the ink dried on the contracts. And then there was the distributor, Bryanston Pictures, who picked up the film and claimed the movie made about $1 million. In reality, it made over $12 million in its first year alone. But Bryanston wasn't exactly in the mood to split fairly. Cast members got their checks months later. One actor said he received $47.07. Another waited 9 months and got nothing. It's the horror story behind the horror story. Make a movie in a meat-scented hell house, survive a flying chainsaw, and walk away with enough for a sandwich. And nothing for some. Number 8. Mafia money was allegedly involved. Wondering why the numbers didn't add up on Texas Chainsaw's profits? Turns out there was mafia money involved. Here's the deal. Bryanston Pictures picked up the movie for distribution. On paper, they paid $225,000 and were supposed to split profits fairly. But somehow Chainsaw grossed over $30 million. And Bryanston claimed there was no money. Real weird. Well, Bryanston's leadership allegedly had ties to the Colombo crime family. Yes, actual mafia. These are the same guys who allegedly hijacked the rights to Deep Throat years earlier. So if you're wondering where all that sweet box office money went,
Now you know.
by the time Hooper and company realized what was happening, Bryanston was broke. As in, no assets, no money, nothing left to sue for. The cast and crew never got their full cut, and the company vanished soon after. So yeah, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre's real monsters were in the accounting department. Number 7. You can eat lunch in Leatherface's house now. Looking for a nice lunch spot in Texas? You could try a quaint little place in Kingsland. It has great food, cozy atmosphere. And oh yeah, it used to be Leatherface's house. The original house from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was moved from its rural location in Williamson County to Kingsland, Texas, where it was fully restored and turned into a restaurant. It's now called the Grand Central Cafe, and yes, they know exactly what it used to be. The house looks a lot more welcoming these days. No bones, no buckets of mystery meat, no deranged man in a mask chasing you through the kitchen. Just breakfast specials and iced tea. The owners lean into the history. There's a nod to the film on the website, and fans occasionally stop by to take photos where their favorite horror movie once made people throw up on set. But don't worry, the chainsaw's long gone. Just don't ask for anything rare, off the grill. It hits a little different here. Number 6. The cast actually hated Franklin. Franklin, the whiny, wheelchair-bound brother in Texas Chainsaw, might be one of horror's most polarizing characters. Some viewers found him annoying. The cast, they agreed. And not just in character. Actor Paul Partain went full method, staying in character between takes, which meant hours of non-stop whining, shouting, and general misery. He basically became Franklin off camera. And let's just say, nobody was thrilled. Marilyn Burns eventually stopped talking to him altogether. Gunnar Hansen, the guy wearing a dead guy's face and swinging a chainsaw, later admitted that Franklin was the only character he was actually happy to kill. To be fair, Partain nailed the role. Franklin was supposed to be frustrating, but behind the scenes, the tension was real. At some point, the line between acting and reality just vanished. When Franklin finally met Leatherface in the dark woods, the scream you hear is real, and maybe, just maybe, the chainsaw had a little extra job satisfaction that day. Number 5. The film was banned around the world. You know your horror movie hit a nerve when entire countries decide it's better off unseen. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was banned in places like Germany, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and even parts of Australia. The reason? Excessive violence and disturbing content. Now keep in mind, this film has shockingly little actual blood, but the intensity? Off the charts. The gritty film stock, the screaming, the meat hook moments, the dinner scene that feels like it might melt your brain, censors weren't having it. Even the UK refused to release it for years. So while US teens were sneaking into midnight screenings, Viewers overseas were being protected from Leatherface, like he was an actual sadist criminal. Eventually, most of those bans were lifted, but it took years. And a lot of horror fans trading bootleg VHS tapes like contraband. Because if you tell people they can't watch something, you better believe they're going to try. Number 4. It was part of the UK's video nasties panic. Back in the early 80s, the UK had a full-blown meltdown over horror movies. They called them video nasties, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre was smack in the middle of it. If you're unfamiliar, video nasties were low-budget, high-shock horror films that circulated on VHS without regulation. Think cannibals, slashers, demons, basically anything that made British lawmakers clutch their pearls. Even though Texas Chainsaw had already been banned theatrically, it became the poster child for everything wrong with home video. Politicians called it dangerous. Parent groups claimed it would corrupt children. Stores that dared to carry it risked getting raided. And remember, this movie barely shows any blood, but it feels dangerous. That's what made it so controversial. Eventually, the panic calmed down. But for a while, owning a copy of Chainsaw in the UK was like smuggling plutonium. You had to watch it in secret, on a fuzzy bootleg, probably in someone's basement. It wasn't just a movie, it was forbidden. And that made it even scarier. Number 3. The Chainsaw franchise refuses to die. Since 1974, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre has spawned 8 sequels, prequels, reboots, and retcons. There's Texas Chainsaw 2, which goes full camp. Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Yep, they tried to get classy with Roman numerals. And that 2003 reboot with Jessica Biel, where the biggest horror was low-rise jeans. Then came the 2006 prequel, The Beginning, and a 2013 3D sequel, because everything had to be 3D back then. Each entry promised a fresh take, but most just gave us more meat hooks, screaming, and chainsaw acrobatics. The timelines don't make sense. Characters reappear after dying. Sometimes Leatherface is 20, sometimes he's 70. But somehow the franchise survives because you just can't kill the legend of a sweaty man in an apron chasing teens through rural Texas. Number 2. The found footage feel was ahead of its time. Before Blair Witch Project made you nauseous and Paranormal Activity had you watching door hinges for an hour, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was already playing with that gritty, documentary-style vibe. Shot on 16mm film with natural light, handheld camera work, and barely there sound design, the movie feels like it was dug out of a police evidence locker. There's no score guiding your emotions, no flashy editing, just raw, shaky chaos, and the kind of grainy film that makes everything look like it's really happening in someone's backyard. And that's what freaked people out. It didn't look like a movie. It looked like something you weren't supposed to be watching. Like you'd accidentally stumbled across a home video of something deeply wrong. Tobe Hooper wanted it to feel real, and it worked a little too well. Add in that fake true story intro, and suddenly people thought they were watching actual snuff footage. It's the reason horror went wild after this. And finally, number 1. It's now preserved by the US government. In 2021, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was officially added to the Library of Congress's National Film Registry. That's right. The same government that once tiptoed around this film now preserves it as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Imagine explaining that to the censors who banned it in the 70s. What made the cut? Well, it wasn't the body count. It was the impact. Hooper's grainy, low-budget nightmare helped redefine American independent filmmaking. It terrified audiences without big-name stars or a polished script. It felt dangerous because it was dangerous. The kind of movie that came out swinging with a power tool and made Hollywood take notes. So next time someone calls it trashy or tasteless, remind them that it sits right next to Citizen Kane and Casablanca in the National Archives. Leatherface, ladies and gentlemen, is officially government-approved art. And that's it for today. But now we've got to ask, which of these terrifying facts did you not see coming? Was it the Christmas shopping origin story? The real-life skin mask doctor? Or the dinner scene that became an actual torture session? Drop a comment below and let us know which fact gave you chills, or just a bad visual you can't unsee. Were you one of the lucky few watching it in a US theater? Or was it smuggled into Weird Dave's basement on a VHS? And if you think Texas Chainsaw was disturbing, wait till you hear this. Grease, yes, the singing, dancing, hand-jiving musical, was almost directed by the guy who made the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Tobe Hooper, same man. That slightly greasy world of a 1950s high school musical. Possibly the happiest musical you've ever seen. Unless you believe the fan theory that Sandy actually drowned at the beach and the whole movie is her dying hallucination with pink ladies, car races, and a flying car straight to the afterlife, is where we're going next. And trust me, it's stranger than you remember.
Wow, that was weird.